Hey there YouTube, we are back with just another video comparison, and today we face two of the best cameras out there, the Huawei Mate 20 Pro and the Sony Xperia Xz2 Premium. Of course, we focus on low-light performance, photos and videos. And front-facing camera, 1080p, 30 frames per second. On the right we have the Sony Xperia, and on the left the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. They both look very fine to me. Sony might have a little edge in sharpness. And front-facing camera, 1080p, 30 frames per second. On the right we have the Sony Xperia, and on the left the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. They both look very fine to me. Sony might have a little edge in sharpness. As a quick disclaimer, I am sorry for the artifacts showing on the Xz2 Premium footage. Don't know what happened there, but all three recordings are messed up, and I just realized this when I started working on this video. Made some more tests and it's all good now. Glitches aside, comparing front-facing video, Sony wide-angle camera is much better suited for this vlog style of videos, Huawei's camera field of view being too narrow. Talking exposure, Huawei exposes better for the main subject, Sony exposes better for the background. It's a matter of preference, which one do you pick. Otherwise, stabilization, detail and focus are fine on both phones. This is 4K, 30 frames per second. Let's see the stabilization. It is pretty good. This is 4K, 30 frames per second. Let's see the stabilization. This is pretty good. "4K video looks very different between the two phones, each having its own strengths and weaknesses. First, Huawei shines again with better exposure and dynamic range. You can see much more detail in the shadow areas. Colors are also better reproduced. Sony on the other hand has a much cleaner footage with less noise and over-sharpening artifacts, visible in the Huawei footage especially on the snow and pavement. Speaking of snow, in Sony's video it is slightly too warm and yellow. Stabilization is good on both phones, no differences here. And this is 1080p, 30 frames per second. On the right the Sony, and on the left the Huawei. Ultra high sensitivity mode is on Sony. And I already can see it's a bit brighter. But the dynamic range on the Mate is much better. And this is 1080p, 30 frames per second. On the right the Sony, and on the left the Huawei. Ultra high sensitivity mode is on Sony, and I already can see it's a bit brighter. But the dynamic range on the Mate is much better. .1080p recordings have almost the same characteristics as 4K video had, but with Sony gaining a slight bump in stabilization and exposure. I couldn't pick a better one here either, as Sony still has the cleaner image, but Huawei has the better exposure, dynamic range and colors. It's worth mentioning that the Mate 20 Pro is much improved over the P20 Pro in all types of video recordings, and it shows here, managing to be as good, if not better, than the Sony, one of the better video cameras out there. Video recordings aside, let's start the photo comparison with some selfie shots. The first set of photos were taken in almost ideal low light conditions, with bright lights shining my face, and both phones did a very good job. Huawei, as in the video recordings, manages to reproduce slightly more accurate colors with better exposure, and Sony, again as in the video recordings, has a cleaner picture with less noise and artifacts. In the second set of selfies, Huawei falls into its own trap of pushing to a brighter exposure. This time, shooting against the bright lights, the Mate manages to overexpose the entire frame, my face included. Sony, even if it's slightly underexposed, it has a much balanced exposure in the end, keeping the background in check. Details and noise are comparable here. Next we have a portrait mode in low light, and both phones do an amazing job, having a very similar photo at first sight. On a closer analysis, we can see that Sony favors slightly warmer tones while the Mate is just a bit colder. Not much of a difference, but still worth mentionable. Zooming in, the Mate manages to resolve slightly more detail with less noise, but Sony is not that far behind. All tests from now on include 3 shots. The Xperia Xz2 Premium has one photo taken with super sensitivity mode on auto, while the Mate 20 Pro has 2 photos, one in auto and the other taken in night mode. Right off the bat, we notice what most of us already expected. The Mate 20 Pro has a slightly cooler tones, while Sony favors more warm colors. Neither is especially wrong, it's a matter of preference here. Out of the 3 photos, one comes up as the worst, and that's the Mate 20 Pro Auto one. It is way too over-sharpened. Taking a closer look, we can see the white hollows around the edges, and in the background, behind the red chair, it's just a mess here. The phone tried to sharpen even the natural blur of the autofocus subjects. In the second shot, we see what again most of us already expected, that the Mate 20 Pro has a much wider dynamic range. The bottom and the top part of the building are pure black on the Sony, thanks to the pumped up contrast. Meanwhile, on the Mate 20 Pro photos, we still can see much detail. And this carries on for the next 10 sets of photos, where the Huawei's impressive dynamic range and exposure capabilities make for a huge difference. Sony has much more contrast, losing details in both shadows and overly bright areas. But Huawei is not without its weaknesses. The regular auto shot is too sharp, trying too hard to resolve detail where it's not actually necessary. Also, the night shot in many situations comes up with a slight watercolor effect, with paintbrush-like details. Overall, it's a matter of preference. If you like more natural photos, or if you usually enlarge the photos on a big display or print the photos, you will go with Sony. But if you only use the camera for posting the photos on social media, or if you just can't resist the awesome dynamic range and exposure, then you will go with the Huawei. I find myself in the second category, so for me it's the Mate, as much as I love natural output from the Sony. On this note, I will let you watch the rest of the video and let me know in the comments which phone you prefer for low light, as they are pretty different one from another. Also, don't forget there is a poll section where you can vote your favorite phone. See you in a few days for another camera comparison video. This is Pixel Peepers signing out.